Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the powerful stories coming next. These stories go beyond fame and success. They explore the human cost behind legendary names, and today's story is one of the most complex and emotional journeys in television history. For generations, William Shatner symbolized certainty, command, and fearless leadership. As Captain James T. Kirk, he stood at the center of the Enterprise, decisive under pressure, always appearing to know exactly what to do next. Millions of viewers grew up believing in that confidence, but behind the uniform and the camera lights was a man wrestling with ambition, insecurity, rivalry, and sacrifice. At 93 years old, Shatner no longer hides the truth of what that journey demanded from him. This is not a story about a flawless hero. It is a story about pressure, hunger, ego, exhaustion, and survival. It begins not with applause or success, but with chaos, uncertainty, and a birth surrounded by danger. To understand the man behind Captain Kirk, you must first understand where his life truly began. William Shatner entered the world under circumstances that foreshadowed a lifetime of instability and challenge. On March 22, 1931, Montreal was locked in one of the most severe snowstorms in its history. Streets were buried, transportation was frozen, and hospitals were unreachable. His mother had no choice but to give birth at home, surrounded by fear rather than comfort, uncertainty rather than preparation. From the very first moment, his life was shaped by disruption. That unplanned, dangerous beginning would later mirror the emotional and professional storms he would face as an adult. Shatner grew up in a Jewish immigrant household during the lingering aftermath of the Great Depression, a time when survival mattered more than dreams. Money was tight and expectations were strict. His parents believed in stability, responsibility, and practical careers. Acting to them was not a future, it was a risk. But even as a child, Shatner felt pulled toward performance with an intensity that separated him from others. There was something inside him that refused to settle for ordinary, even when the world around him demanded it. While other children focused on school routines and neighborhood games, William Shatner gravitated toward the stage. At just 8 years old, he was enrolled in an acting school run by a respected Canadian actress. This was not a hobby for him, it was an obsession. By the age of 10, he was already earning money as a professional performer, appearing in radio dramas for the CBC, including classical adaptations that demanded discipline and emotional range. His confidence behind a microphone was striking, especially for someone so young. When he portrayed Tom Sawyer in a local theater production, critics took notice. They remarked on his presence, his authority, and his unusual command of the stage. That kind of praise does something dangerous to a child. It plants the belief that you are destined for something greater, something exceptional. For Shatner, those early compliments became fuel. They convinced him that he was not meant to live quietly or safely. Even as expectations at home pushed him toward stability, his internal compass pointed firmly toward ambition. In 1948, Shatner enrolled at McGill University, officially studying economics to satisfy his parents' wishes. Unofficially, his heart was nowhere near a classroom. He skipped lectures, ignored coursework, and immersed himself completely in theater. The campus stage became his true education. By 1950, he was writing and starring in student productions that drew attention beyond the university. CBC producers noticed his intensity and began offering him television appearances. This period revealed a defining pattern that would follow him for decades. When faced with a choice between security and ambition, Shatner always chose ambition regardless of the cost. It caused friction at home and uncertainty in his future, but retreat was never an option for him. He was not interested in safe paths or backup plans. He wanted everything, even if it meant instability. That mindset would eventually bring him fame, but it would also leave scars he would carry for life. By the mid-1950s, Shatner made a decisive and risky move. He left Canada for New York City to pursue acting full-time. He was young, driven, and financially vulnerable. His Broadway debut in Tamburlaine the Great promised prestige, but the production collapsed after just 20 performances. For many actors, that kind of failure would have ended the dream. For Shatner, it only hardened his resolve. He turned to television, taking relentless work wherever he could find it. He appeared in series after series, slowly building a reputation as an intense and emotionally volatile performer. His work on The Twilight Zone became especially significant. Playing men unraveling under pressure, he delivered performances that felt raw and unsettling. Audiences remembered him, casting directors noticed him, but this reputation also labeled him. He became known as the man who could convincingly lose control, a trait that would later define both his greatest success and his deepest conflicts. When William Shatner accepted the role of Captain James T. Kirk, he understood the stakes immediately. The first pilot of Star Trek had already failed. The network wanted energy, urgency, and emotional connection. Shatner knew that if the show failed again, it would not survive. That pressure shaped his entire approach. He rejected the idea of Kirk as a stiff military commander. Instead, he envisioned a leader who felt human, curious, and unpredictable. someone who could joke one moment and assert absolute authority the next. He drew inspiration from Horatio Hornblower and Alexander the Great, blending intellect with hunger. Kirk, in Shatner's mind, was driven by instinct and confidence. When the series premiered, audiences responded immediately. Kirk felt alive in a way television heroes rarely did. But those same creative choices planted the seeds of tension behind the scenes. Star Trek was designed as an ensemble, but it quickly became clear that audiences were drawn most strongly to Kirk and Spock. Leonard Nimoy's portrayal of Spock struck a deep chord. His restraint, logic, and emotional distance fascinated viewers. Fan mail poured in, much of it focused on Spock. For Shatner, this shift was unsettling. He believed the captain should lead not only the ship but the story itself. What began as creative competition slowly became personal. Shatner has since admitted that ego played a role. Sharing attention did not come easily. The dynamic that worked so powerfully on screen created insecurity off it. Neither man was wrong, but both felt pressure to protect their place. Admiration and rivalry existed side by side, creating tension that would follow them for years. The working conditions on Star Trek only intensified these tensions. The show was produced on a tight budget with brutal schedules. 16-hour days were common. Sometimes filming stretched beyond 20 hours. The cast was exhausted and underpaid, constantly aware that cancellation loomed. In that environment, small disagreements became major conflicts. Shatner and Nimoy clashed over tone, performance, and emphasis. One pushed for intensity, the other for restraint. Writers grew frustrated, accusing Shatner of pushing to center Kirk at the expense of others. Resentment spread quietly. The set became a pressure cooker where everyone was fighting for survival, recognition, and creative control. As the show gained momentum, behind-the-scenes conflict became impossible to ignore. Scripts were constantly rewritten, often late into the night. During the Trouble with Tribbles, Shatner and Nimoy reportedly spent 14 straight hours reshaping scenes. While they believed they were improving the story, writers felt undermined. Other cast members watched their lines disappear. Tensions peaked during the Paradise Syndrome, when a disagreement over Kirk's memory loss portrayal halted filming. Gene Roddenberry had to intervene. These moments were not isolated. They were symptoms of exhaustion, fear, and ambition colliding. By the later seasons, exhaustion became constant. During the Tholian Web, after nearly 18 continuous hours on set, Shatner snapped. He threw his script and refused to continue. It was not defiance, it was collapse. The incident forced production to introduce rest periods, but the damage was already done. The strain followed him home, where the consequences were devastating. Shatner's marriage to Gloria Rand suffered deeply. While he filmed endlessly, she raised their 3 daughters largely alone. Birthdays were missed, holidays sacrificed. One Christmas he filmed while his family celebrated without him. He later calculated that he missed 217 family dinners. That number haunted him. Emotional distance replaced intimacy. By the time Star Trek was canceled, the marriage was already broken. When Star Trek ended, it ended suddenly. There was no celebration, no reassurance. Shatner believed the role had closed doors rather than opened them. Casting dried up. He accepted low-budget roles to survive. Financial pressure mounted. Child support, no steady income, and minimal residuals pushed him to the edge. Eventually, Shatner was living out of a camper in the San Fernando Valley. The man who commanded a starship was functionally homeless. He showered where he could and hid his situation from the industry. One Christmas, unable to afford gifts, he wrapped Star Trek memorabilia for his daughters. The shame stayed with him for years. With time came perspective. As Star Trek found new life through syndication and fan conventions, Shatner began to see the larger picture. At 93, he admits his flaws. He acknowledges ego, insecurity, and mistakes. The rivalry with Nimoy, he says, was built on admiration as much as conflict. If he could go back, he would listen more and fight less. William Shatner does not see Star Trek as a story of villains or victims. He sees it as a human experiment under pressure. Low budgets, fear of cancellation, and ambition pushed everyone beyond their limits. Mistakes were made because no one believed the show would last long enough to be judged. Yet despite everything, it survived. And so did he. Do you believe William Shatner's ambition created the magic of Star Trek, or did it cost too much? Share your thoughts in the comments, like this video, subscribe, and explore the next stories waiting for you.